So the first question, the regulation of cardiac activity involves which of the following? So the first option is nodal tissue. It is right. Two nodal tissues are there. So what is this nodal tissue? This is a special tissue which shows the properties of both muscles as well as neuron. Okay. So, and this nodal tissue is of two different types. SA node, which from where impulse is generating, and then AV node. Okay. So SA node, it is called as pacemaker, and AV node is called as space setter. So option 1, that is right. Then neural centers in medulla, it also control what? The cardiac activity. Then adrenal medullary hormones. Adrenal medullary hormones means what? Suppose if this is the kidney and the kidney carry a particular gland, and that gland is called as what? Adrenal gland. On the apex of the kidney, adrenal gland is present. And this adrenal gland, it has two different parts. The outer part called cortex and inner part called what? Medulla. Okay. So this is the cortex part and this is the medulla part. And this medulla will secrete some hormones and they called as adrenaline, noradrenaline, and then one neurotransmitter called dopamine. Okay, so these are the three different things secreted by the adrenal medulla. And then this adrenal medullary hormones can also regulate what? The cardiac activity. So the answer is what? All the above. Option D is the answer. That is, cardiac activity is controlled by both extrinsic and intrinsic. And then what is this intrinsic and extrinsic mechanism? Intrinsic is, that is the internal control, and extrinsic means the control from outside. Okay, intrinsic control means the heart itself can regulate. For example, cardiomyocytes, that is, they are the cells, muscle cells in the heart, and that control is actually the intrinsic control. Okay, and then the extrinsic means the control from outside, which in turn includes the autonomous nervous system, that is the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and then by the control of hormones also. Okay. And the next question, arrange the following in the correct sequence for conduction of an impulse through human heart. So the impulse is generated from SA node, right? So suppose if this is the human heart, and this is the left atrium, and this is the right atrium, and then this is the left ventricle, and this is the right ventricle. Okay. And then this what? SA node is here. Here is the SA node, and here is the AV node. So this is the SA node, and here you can see what? AV node. And then what? Bundle of his AV bundle, and then here what? Purkinje fibers. Okay. So bundle of his, then Purkinje fibers. So the impulse will be first generated by the SA node, and then to where? AV node, and then to what? AV bundle, then to bundle branches, and then finally to Purkinje fibers. So the answer is 5, then 3, then 1, then what? 4, and finally 5. Sorry, 2. 5, 3, 1, 4, 2. So 5, 3, 1, 4, 2. That is the option A. And then the P wave of a normal ECG represents. So P wave represents atrial depolarization. QRS complex represents ventricle depolarization and atrial repolarization. That is what? Atrial diastole. Okay. And then T wave represents ventricle repolarization. So the answer is P wave of normal ECG represents what? Atrial depolarization. That is atrial systole. Okay. And then the QRS complex in ECG represents what? Ventricle depolarization. So option B is the answer. Ventricle depolarization as well as auricle repolarization. Okay. That is ventricle systole. This is what the QRS complex represents. This QRS complex that represents ventricle systole and auricle diastole. That means ventricle depolarization and auricle repolarization. So option B is the correct answer. Next question, the first heart sound, commonly called the love sound, is produced by. This heart sound is always produced by the closing of the valve. Okay, closing of valves. And the closing of AV valves, that is bicuspid and tricuspid valve, that produces the first heart sound, that is the love sound. And then the closing of the semilunar valves, that produces the second heart sound, that is the dub sound. Okay. So here the question is, the first heart sound, commonly called lub, is produced by what? The closure of AV valves. Which valve guards the opening of right atrium and right ventricle? That is the tricuspid valve. Option B. Which ECG wave represents ventricle repolarization? That is the last wave. T wave. Option C is the answer. Which pair of statement about basophil is correct? The most abundant WBC, that is the neutrophil. And the next option, they release histamine and heparin. Histamine, that is a vasodilator. Heparin, anticoagulant, which participate in inflammatory response. So that is the correct option. And then the next option, they have kidney-shaped nucleus and perform phagocytosis. It is the characteristic feature of what the kidney-shaped nucleus, that is by. And then the production of antibodies, it is the feature of lymphocyte. So option B, that is the correct answer. Which WBC is the most abundant in normal human blood? That is the neutrophil. Option C. A clot is primarily formed by a network of what fibrin? Option B is the answer. So what is the mechanism here? We know the presence of wound, right? And this wound will stimulate what? The blood cell called what? Platelets. Okay. And then this platelets will produce what? Thromboplastin or thrombokinase. Thromboplastin. And this thromboplastin or thrombokinase, and this will convert what? Inactive prothrombin to active thrombin. So inactive conversion is inactive prothrombin. Inactive prothrombin to what? Thrombin, which is active. And this thrombin is active. Okay. And the next step is this active thrombin will convert what? Inactive fibrinogen to fibrin. Fibrinogen to what? Fibrin. And this fibrin makes clot. So this is the mechanism. First, the presence of wound that stimulate the platelets, and the platelets will release what? Thromboplastin or thrombokinase, and this thromboplastin will convert what? Inactive prothrombin to active thrombin. Then this thrombin will convert fibrinogen to fibrin, and finally this forms the clot. So this is the mechanism of clotting. So the answer is the clot primarily formed by the network of what? Fibrin. So next question, which statement is about the cardiac cycle is correct? AV valves close during ventricle diastole. So actually the AV valves are open during ventricle diastole time. Okay, they are open during ventricle diastole time. Or the AV valves are closed only during ventricle systole. And then the blood moves freely from atria to ventricles during joint diastole. So that is the right statement. It is during joint diastole. Joint diastole means both the ventricles and auricles are in relaxed phase. So the blood moves freely from atria to ventricle. So option B is the right answer. And then semilunar valves close when ventricular pressure rises. So actually this semilunar valve opens when ventricular pressure rises. And then AV node initiates atrial contraction. It is not the AV node, it is the SA node initiate the heartbeat. Okay. The vascular connection between digestive tract and liver is called as what? Hepatic portal system. Option B is the correct answer. What is this portal system? Portal system, suppose if this is one organ, okay, and from any organ the blood is collected to where? Any organ the blood is collected to heart, right? Heart for pumping. But in case of portal system, the blood from one organ is collected to where? The another organ is collected to another organ, and this is called as portal system. That is organ to organ connection. So this is one organ and this is another organ, and if the blood from one organ is collected to another organ before going to heart, okay, and this is called as portal system. And the portal system that connect what? The digestive tract to the liver. That is from the digestive system the blood is collected to liver before going to where? Heart. Okay, and this portal system is called as the portal system that connect the digestive system and the liver, and that is called as hepatic portal system, which is seen in all vertebrates. This hepatic portal system, it is present in all vertebrates. Okay, and one more portal system is there which is seen in amphibians. That is the renal portal system. Renal portal system means the blood from the limbs, that is the lower body parts, are collected to heart, and that portal system is called as renal portal system. So here the answer is what? The vascular connection between digestive tract and liver, that is the hepatic portal system. Arrange the following formed elements in decreasing order of abundance. So RBC, it is about 5 to 5.5 million, and the platelets, it is about 1.5 to 3.5 lakh. And the neutrophil 60 to 65%, monocyte 6 to 8%, and eosinophil 2 to 3%. Okay, so option A is the correct answer. The people with AB blood group are considered universal recipient mainly because their plasma lack what? Antibodies. Option C, anti-A and anti-B antibodies are present. Sorry, absent. Then which enzyme convert fibrinogen to fibrin? This thing we discussed. Fibrinogen to fibrin, it is converted by thrombin. Okay. So answer B. So which WBC is primarily associated with phagocytosis? Option A is the answer, neutrophils. Neutrophils are highly phagocytic cells and it is the first line of cellular defense. And then monocytes are also involved in phagocytic activity. When it reaches the tissues, it becomes the larger cell called what? Macrophages. So macrophages, they are actually the monocytes. A person's cardiac output is 5 liter per minute. Their end diastolic volume is 100 ml and end systolic volume is 50 ml. What is their heart rate? We know the equation, that is the cardiac output, right? Cardiac output. So cardiac output is what? Heart rate into stroke volume, right? Stroke volume into heart rate. Stroke volume into heart rate. So this heart rate equals cardiac output by what? Stroke volume. Cardiac output by stroke volume. Okay. So first you have to calculate the stroke volume. So to calculate the stroke volume, one equation is here. Stroke volume equals end diastolic volume by end systolic volume. So stroke volume is end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume. End diastolic volume is what? 100 ml. Okay. So 100 ml minus what? 50 ml. End systolic volume is this 50 ml. So the stroke volume is the 50 ml. Okay. And then this thing, heart rate equals cardiac output by stroke volume. So cardiac output is what? 5 liters per minute, right? So 5000 ml by this thing, that is the stroke volume. Stroke volume is this 50 ml. Okay. So the answer is what? 100. So the answer is 100 beats per minute. So option C is the answer. Which ECG wave indicates ventricle repolarization? That is the last wave, that is T wave. Which plasma protein is mainly involved in blood clotting? The answer is what? Fibrinogen. Option C. Albumin, globulin and fibrinogen are respectively associated with. Albumin, it is involved in maintaining osmotic pressure. Globulin's defense mechanism. Fibrinogen, blood clotting. So option A is the right answer. Mature human RBC without nucleus because they need more internal space for what? Hemoglobin. The immature RBC is called as erythroblast. Erythroblast, which are the cells from bone marrow. Okay. And this erythroblast, what is the feature of this erythroblast? Nucleus is present. Nucleus is present, but what is absent? Hemoglobin is absent. So this particular cell is not able to transport oxygen. But when it becomes mature, that is erythroblast becomes erythrocyte, nucleus is absent. Erythrocyte, this cell is devoid of nucleus, that is nucleus is absent, but it carry what? Hemoglobin. Okay. So the mature human RBC, that is erythrocyte, is without nucleus. For what? They need internal space for hemoglobin. So option B. Hepatic portal vein carries blood to the liver mainly from where? Intestine. The reduction in which blood component can lead to excessive bleeding because of impaired clotting? Answer option D, platelets. Serum differs from plasma because serum lack the clotting factors such as fibrinogen. That is, the plasma containing clotting factors including fibrinogen. But when blood clots, many clotting factors are consumed or removed and leaving what? Serum. Okay, so serum equals plasma minus clotting factors. So option C, that is the correct answer. Next, compared with systemic circulation, pressure in pulmonary artery is lower. Why? Because pulmonary artery is low pressure circulation because it carries blood from right ventricle to lungs, which is only a short distance. Okay, and the pulmonary arterial pressure is thus lower than systemic arterial pressure. So systemic arterial pressure is very high, in which animal has two completely separate circulatory pathways, that is the human, that is left side of the heart carry the oxygenated blood and the right side carry the deoxygenated blood. Okay. And then the double circulation, the blood is flowing through heart twice during one circulation, and pulmonary circulation is there, systemic circulation is there, and then one more circulation, the circulation between heart wall and heart. Okay, so heart to heart circulation, that is the coronary circulation, which is the shortest route. And the pulmonary circulation between lungs and heart, and the systemic circulation between the body and the heart. And the systemic circulation is the longest route. Okay. The second heart sound, dub, is produced by this thing we discussed, that is the option C, closure of the semilunar valves. Maximum blood pressure in mammalian circulatory system occurs during ventricle systole. So erythropoiesis, the word erythro, it means what? RBC, and poiesis means production or synthesis. So erythropoiesis means the production of RBC, the formation of RBC, option B. Parasympathetic stimulation of heart generally decreases the heart rate, while the sympathetic stimulation opposite effect, that is sympathetic, increases the heart rate. Okay, and it is by the adrenaline, and here it is by the acetylcholine. Why is an individual with AB blood group considered universal recipient? Because they lack what? Anti-A and anti-B antibodies. Option C. Which component of ECG represents atrial depolarization? The first wave, that is the P wave. Which cell is characterized by bilobed nucleus and is associated with allergic reactions? Eosinophil. Which organ is commonly referred to as graveyard of RBC? That means where the RBC is destroyed. So the spleen is the right answer. Old and damaged RBCs are removed from circulation mainly by macrophages in spleen. Thus, spleen is called graveyard of RBC. Then in ABO group system, which blood group is the safest choice as a red cell donor in emergency when the recipient's group is unknown? O group, because the O group can be donated to any other groups since it lacks both antigens A and B, and that is why it is called as universal donor. Okay, so the O group can be donated. The bundle of is, it is a part of heart. Option B. Which plasma protein directly involved in blood coagulation? The answer is fibrinogen. Option B. Arteries are best described as blood vessels that carry blood away from heart. Option C is the right answer, because the defining feature of an artery is the direction of blood flow, not the oxygen content. The arteries carry the oxygenated blood, it is right, but the defining property is actually the direction of the blood flow. So option C is the correct answer. That is, artery carry blood from heart to different body parts and veins carry blood from different body parts to heart. Which blood group can generally donate RBC to an individual with AB blood group assuming ABO compatibility? All the blood groups can be given because it lacks the antibodies in plasma, and that is why it is called as universal recipient. Which statement regarding human circulatory system is correct? Arteries generally have thicker walls than veins. It is correct. Angina is due to reduced blood supply to heart muscles. It is also correct. That is, it is a chest pain. And then AB blood group can be donated to everyone in the ABO group system. It is wrong. The universal donor is the O group. And then calcium ions are important for blood coagulation. That is correct. So option D, 1, 2 and 4. This is the correct option. For rapid distribution of an injected medicine throughout the body, the most suitable route is IV, intravenous injection, because it can directly into the supply, directly into the bloodstream. The approximate hemoglobin concentration in healthy adult is 12 to 16 gram per 100 ml. Which changes are expected when a person moves to a high altitude? So the first changes, increased RBC production will be there, and then increased breathing rate. Okay, so option 1 and 2. Then damage to caudate tendineae of the tricuspid valve would most directly affect. So what is this caudate tendineae? Suppose if this is the heart and this is the left atrium and this is the right atrium and this is the left ventricle and this is the right ventricle. Okay, so the muscles located in the ventricle, they called as what? Papillary muscles. So these are the muscles in ventricle called papillary muscles. Okay, so what are these caudate tendineae? Thread-like structures arising from these papillary muscles to the valve, that is bicuspid and tricuspid valve. These fibers are called as caudate tendineae, and these are the structures that prevent the dislocation of the valve. Okay, so when caudate tendineae is damaged, what happens? That affect the prevention of backflow into the right atrium. Okay, so option B is the correct answer. Compared with blood, lymph generally contains what? Not more RBC, that is, lymph is a colorless fluid. Colorless fluid containing the lymphocytes normally lack RBC and much less protein than plasma. Okay, so option is, that is, much less protein. Option C. The function of the lymph, that is, it is finally collected to the bloodstream, and one more function, it transport absorbed fat from intestinal lacteals. What is this lacteal? It is the large lymph vessel which is seen in the villi of intestine. Okay, and these are the functions of what? Lymph. Okay. Next question, globulins in blood plasma are primarily associated with what defense mechanism? So option B, Which ECG component corresponds to ventricle repolarization? That is the T wave ventricle repolarization. And which WBCs are strongly associated with phagocytosis? The answer is option A, neutrophils and monocytes. And the last question, which WBC releases histamine and natural anticoagulant heparin? The answer is option B, basophils.